They asked rapists and they asked killers what they would do. All the rapists and killers said, I would squeeze harder.
A lot of men out there are excellent providers, but not so many of them are protectors.
I saw one lady holding her daughter and was like, where's your dad? Where's your dad?
When he banged into his chest, he was also listening for the strength of the man's voice when he yelled Integros.
Random people put themselves already in a victim role.
Yes.
Welcome to the Patriot Point Show. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Alexander Gordy. I'm here with my co-hosts Steffen Banta and Randy Rozzell. Today we wanted to talk a little bit about empowerment, and I'll let Steffen take from here.
Yeah, for sure. I think we were just talking kind of off the mic about the importance, especially, I think we're all a little bit traditional here, and a little more old-fashioned. I believe that, the man should be in that protector role, right? In that kind of protector provider role. Not that, I think, I agree completely that like things should be totally equal across society wise, but just like physically we are more capable, right? But just like certain situations that I've seen, like teaching martial arts for a long time, things along those lines, a lot of men don't train, right? Like I'm surrounded by a bunch of guys that train, or, are military, kind of in that sphere. That's kind of my circle. But that I'm in like a little nucleus. I'm in a very like bubble, right? And then when I peek outside of that, it's just fascinating to see that, the majority, 99% of the population doesn't train, right? I would say like 99% of guys don't train. And training can be anything, right? Like that's even just being fit, right? Like, can you, pick your wife up out of your house and run her down the stairs, or can you defend yourself? Or can you defend those around you? And I just think that's really something that is really lacking from a lot of people. So if anything, it should be a call to action just to train, and don't be a potential victim. Be a protector, not a liability. As a man, right? Like, I urge you, if you're listening to this, if just the average guy were to come and violate your family, would you be able to stop them? And if the answer is no, you should probably go train, right? And also don't have that false sense of security either. I think a lot of guys, they think that like they're all of a sudden gonna like be able to defend themselves, especially if they're bigger guys, right? Like if you're like 6 feet tall, 6'2", 6'3", whatever, and you're 200 pounds, and you think, you in college, you got in a scuffle or whatever, right? You think that you're gonna be able to defend yourself. Well, the guy that's coming after your family, he's probably more experienced than you. He's probably trained before, right? And I remember I was listening to a TED Talk, and you might have seen this one. But they interviewed there was a black and white photo of like a kind of two genderless forms, and one had the other against the wall, and they were strangling them. It was just kind of like a black and white cutout. Have you heard about this? And they brought it to like 500, just a double-blind study, whatever, with just random people off the street, that were, they pulled them into their, I don't know, it was a clinical study or whatever. Not a clinical study, but in their office, like psychology. Right. And they were just asking everyday people, the 9-to-5s, people that didn't train. And everybody that they say, hey, what would you do in this scenario? And all these like civilians, just random people were like, oh, well, I would, fight his grip off my neck. I would kick him in the groin. I would run and scream for help, right? And they gave all these answers. And then when they brought it to like supermax prisons and they asked rapists and they asked killers what they would do, all the rapists and killers said, I would squeeze harder. I would, torque their neck in this way. So they all put themselves, but they didn't assign roles.
But the killers assign themselves the role.
The killers assign themselves the role of the killer.
To the attacker versus the defender role.
Yes, right. And then the random people put themselves already in a victim role.
Yes.
Right, and so it's kind of an interesting thing for me to see, where like people were already thinking like, I'm not saying I would have answered differently. I probably would have answered as the attackee, like the person being attacked.
Yeah.
Yeah. But maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I would have been like, oh, you don't know that scenario. Maybe you're holding that guy up against the wall because he just, kicked your kid or something at a soccer ball game in the face or something. You don't know. I mean, anything could happen, right? Or, he's in your house and you're trying to, this random guy broke into your home or something. So people need to realize that there are individuals like that out there. They do exist, right? Like the people that have that mentality of like, I'm going to squeeze your neck harder and wring your neck. Those people do exist. And those people, they're out there, right? And you walk past them, right? Then you might see them at a gas station or something, or you might encounter them. And then, I've read into some of this stuff. Like another big thing is getting chosen, right? Like you're probably not going to get chosen, Randy, yourself. Maybe your daughter would or something like that. You know, that would be something that, you know, you've trained her for, to, you know, situational awareness and things along those lines. But you're a big dude, you're jacked, you're tatted, you look like military, got the camo hat with the backpack on that's got the Molly on it. Like, if I saw you at a gas station, I'd be like, probably not that guy with the big truck with UDT on the back, you know, and like the big with the seal trident and stuff. I'd be like,
Yeah.
I'd probably come up and try to have a conversation with you, but it would be a very friendly one, you know?
Yeah.
Or like Gordy, like, you know, not maybe as intimidating, but like you're still a big dude. You know what I mean? Yeah. You have an air of confidence about you, right? Like you walk with your shoulders back, right? You know, or me with maybe cauliflower ears. Somebody says, oh, you know, but we're most likely not going to get chosen, but we've still trained ourselves.
We don't present ourselves like victims.
No, don't present ourselves like victims.
Right.
But then on the flip side, you know, you have those guys that are, you know, I see it. Like there was an active shooter scare. I texted you guys about it, you know, in downtown, and I was there. Nothing it ended up being a fight, loud noises. People thought there was an active shooter, but it was crazy to see these dads and moms, you know, 200 yards away, 100 yards away from where the building where this supposed active shooter was going, you know, SWAT's, you know, like I've never seen so many cops, right? Just cops. And they're standing there looking starstruck, not moving. You know, I saw some one lady holding their daughter and was like, where's your dad? Where's your dad? Like 1 block away from where the supposed active shooter was. I was like, just take your child and egress out of the area. Like if that was my child, I would throw him over my shoulder and I would just sprint in one direction until I was 2, 3, 4 miles away. And I know my capability. I could do that if I had to, right? And also I had my firearm at the time too. And so I was able to get like there was a scared single mother with her children and stuff. I was able to load them up into my vehicle and take them to their vehicle, and they were able to get to the highway and stuff. But again, that's that sheepdog role, right? That's that kind of protector role. I just think it's really important to have that capability and to think in stressful moments like that and to rely on some relative training, even if it's common sense, right? Like first we were going to walk them to their car, and then Laurence was like, hey, why don't you just put them in your truck? I was like, oh, that's way smarter, right? So he even was a little bit more intelligent than me in that moment because I was kind of trying to figure things out. But just like common sense like that, right? And you know, Laurence never served, never anything, but he's capable. He has training. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He lives in that mindset of that protector role, right? He's a dad to his daughters, right? It's like all those things. You have daughters, you know, so it's, you have a daughter, right? And so it's kind of that role of, you know, being that strong man and being able to take care of yourself. And, you know, evil does exist, right? How are you gonna meet that if it chooses you?
Well, strong people are definitely harder to kill.
Yes, for sure.
Right. But I think, you know, your point to training is, you know, with training, to be specific, you should be somewhat physically fit so that you're capable of protecting others. You're not just going to fall over from a heart attack, right? When shit hits the fan, right? You know, to your active shooter, you know, you're not just going to have a heart attack when you hear gunshots go off, right? And be a victim. If you carry a firearm, you should know how to use it. And you should, you know, more than just being physically fit, you should be able to protect yourself and others, right? So I should be able to protect myself, my wife, my children, my home, right? And that's, you know, a lot of men out there, I think to your point, Steffen, are excellent providers.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent providers. But not so many of them are protectors.
Yes.
Right? And we're called to be both. We're actually called to be even one more thing, leaders.
Love that.
Right?
Love that.
So we're, you know, for our families as good Christian men, you know, I ask God every day, Lord, help me always to be able to provide for, protect, and lead my family.
Love that.
But to be able to lead them, I have to provide and protect them first.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Now they'll want to follow me, right? Now they'll listen to me for that leadership. If I fell at the other two, why would they let me lead them?
Exactly. Love that.
So I think all those things go hand to hand together.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Whole person concept.
Yep.
Well, when we, you know, it's funny. I used to talk to the SQT kids. I'd give them the speech called the man speech. But at first, I would kind of talk to them first about, like, you know, the core values of the Navy and its honor, commitment, and courage, right? But I would also ask them about, integrity. And when people they kind of mix integrity and courage a little bit. They're kind of like, oh, it's doing the right thing when nobody's watching. Well, integrity in its original form meant whole or complete. And I would talk to them about I'd give them an example, the old Roman centurion, right? Well, he'd have his troops lined up and he would march down the row of troops. And when he would do that, the soldier would pop tall, bang his fist into his chest, and yell integros. Integros means integrity. Well, what was that centurion listening for? He wasn't just listening for the sound that well-oiled armor and shield made when he banged into his chest. He was also listening for the strength of the man's voice when he yelled integros. Because without both, that soldier wasn't complete.
Right.
So integrity means to be complete. It means to be whole. And I would talk to those SQT students, about what it meant to be a whole or complete man, whole and complete warrior. And it's funny, back then it was kind of like, well, what makes you a man? Well, is it fighting, fucking, and drinking? That's kind of what it was. What's cool is you're talking about, manhood and authentic manhood right now. And we kind of span the generations. You're in your 20s.
Yeah.
Gordy's in his 30s. I'm almost 50, right? So we kind of get to see that. When I was growing up, it was like, well, what makes you a man? Well, can you fight? Can you fuck? How many girls can you get? And can you drink? Well, that's not what makes you a man, right? That's not really it at all. Can you protect? Well, that's different than fighting, right? We have fighting skill, but can I protect? Not just myself, but others, right? Drinking, who gives a shit about that? Can I abstain? Can I stay away from that, right? When I need to show up the next day, right? When it comes to fucking, well, fuck, any male can sleep with as many women as they want. You know what it takes to be a man? To honor a commitment that you made for the rest of your life to your wife.
Definitely.
So these are things that I would talk to them about. And I think it kind of goes along with your training. Well, training is part of being that whole and complete man.
Oh, yeah.
Love
that, Randy.
I know recently, Randy, you had brought your son to a weekend getaway.
Yeah.
If you wanted to tell us a little bit about that, because that's essentially what we're talking about. You're developing him to be a man. It was manhood he was entering.
Yeah, so I went to my buddy Dave Brown, who is also a high-level jiu-jitsu black belt. He won worlds as a brown belt, masters, former wrestler, great guy, one of my best friends. I've got two guys that I consider my best friend, and Dave is one of them. And even though we didn't serve in the military together, we met through jiu-jitsu. We just hit it off. He's like a year older than me, and he's got 3 daughters and a son, where I've got 2 daughters and a son, and we just kind of bonded through that. Well, there's a church in San Marcos, California called Awaken, and they're all over, and they do this Emerge men's camp once a year, which is a camping trip for men to get together and just talk about God, do fellowship. And they also bring their sons. So it's not just for just men, but men can also bring their sons too. And what they do is on Saturday morning, it starts on Thursday. On Saturday morning, there's rites of passage for young men. It's 12 to 18 years old, and it's a 2-mile obstacle and endurance course. And so it's pretty cool. Yeah. So the boys start off, and first of all, they take them away from their dads. So when they start the race, I can't do the race with him. He's got to do it himself. So there's all these other boys between 12 and 18 that are doing the race, and they'll encourage and help each other. And So they got to do this run. It's down this dirt trail, and they've got to climb over these obstacles, right? And then they've got to go underneath barbed wire, and then they got to carry sandbags a certain way. Then they got to run through this mud pit. They got to jump over a fire pit. They just got to carry this log up this big hill, right? And at the end, they've got men there with holding football pads, and the boys have to run the gauntlet through the football pads, while the guys hit them, And my son was super nervous. He's never done anything like this. And he kept asking me, like, what are they going to do to me, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't know, dude. You're going to figure it out, but you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
All right? You're not going to be alone. All right? There's going to be other kids running it with you. And my son did so good. I was so proud of him.
Awesome.
And just to see him at the end, how it changed him and changed his confidence to get a dog tag at the end, like, hey, you completed this. And then I was like there to hug him, like, oh, I'm so proud of you. You did this. And, I saw some other kids that were just falling over, not being able to finish it. Now, of course, it's a church camp, so everybody's, and some dads were like having to push their kids up over the obstacles. And I'm like, I didn't have to do any of that with him. He attacked it. And my son is, you guys have met my son. He's quiet. He's very reserved, he's way better than I am in a lot of ways. He's very empathetic. He cares about other people better than I do. He's just, he's a good young man. I blame his mother. But I was just so proud of him. And just to see him complete that, and then already he started wrestling practice this Monday. And he loves it. I was really worried. I was really worried about it because I was like, oh man, he didn't really like jiu-jitsu when I made him do jiu-jitsu, but he's loved wrestling. His coaches are making it fun, so they're doing it right. In fact, his friend came over this weekend who's a better wrestler than him because he's done it before. I set up mats in the garage. They went out there and practiced for an hour together.
That's awesome.
He has never asked me to practice anything like on his own, right? Like every time we're going out to do football, I'm like, come on, let's go play football. And he's like, nah, okay, all right. So Monday, after wrestling practice and after the weekend of doing this merge camp, he was on B team last year in football. He's like, Dad, I'm like, yeah. He goes, I don't want to be on B team next year. I want to be on A team.
Let's go.
And he was like, I want to do so well. The coaches have no choice but to play me.
Love that.
And I was like, where is Weston? What did you do with him? I've never heard my son
Love that, man. That's
talk
awesome.
so confidently and be so determined to do well. And I couldn't wait to get home and tell my wife. I was just like, babe, he's changing. He's changing.
Awesome.
It's awesome.
Turning a man over here, yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome,
like
man.
he's just, and I think that camp had something to do with it. He's still only 13. Testosterone hasn't kicked in yet, so he's not going to start kicking my butt probably until next year. But
Just wait. You're going to get some biceps overnight.
No, I think it'll be a while before he can kick my butt. But this wrestling practice is definitely going to help him.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it was really cool. And when I was talking about like the SQT students, right, and which is SEAL qualification training, the guys that have graduated BUZZ, but they're not quite SEALs yet. They have to go through another 5 months to learn more advanced skills. I asked them too, I was like, hey, how many of you, and this was before I would give them their man speech, got a man speech from your dad? Like, son, this is what it is to be a man. And most people would only, like, a handful of, so the majority of them wouldn't. And I never got that speech from my dad either. And I thought that it was important to give them a speech on what it was. Being a warrior is one thing, being a man is another, and they're two different things, right? You can be a warrior but not be a good man. To be a good man, you're both.
Yeah, I like that.
And so I would ask them, I'm like, all right, boys, all right, men, this is your man speech. And I would give it to them. And I literally gave them the speech I wish I would have gotten from my dad. I wish we'd been sitting around a campfire, drinking a beer like when I was 17 or something. Like, boy, you're coming of age. This is what it is to be a man. I didn't get that, and I don't think a lot of men get that. And So I wanted to give it to the guys that were becoming SEALs, that were getting ready to go over and face our nation's enemies. I wanted to give them a man speech before they did that. And so I would do that for the SQT students. And what I really liked about this church and this Emerge camp was in our society now, we don't have a rites of passage. And when you think about human history, right? You know, you look at Native American tribes, you look at the old Scottish tribes, and, you know, even, you know, in Africa, right? There's boys had to do something to earn manhood. What does it say? Well, you get a driver's license when you're 16.
Yeah.
You can buy cigarettes when you're 18. Yeah. Great. You can go get, you know, you can legally buy beer when you're 21. Do any of those things make you a man? No. Right? So what does?
And you are very right in pointing that out, that most people just equate age to it. I'm a man. But it has nothing to do with age, because there's grown-ass kids.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, there's plenty of 30-year-old boys walking around. You know? But that's what was really cool about it. He got to go through this rites of passage. And now I'm like, son, you're becoming a man. And he got to go through something hard. And it wasn't just me. There were 3,000 people at this camp.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot, right? But at the end of this thing were all these fathers cheering on all these sons. And he had this group of men just like, congratulations, young man. You know, cool. Like, welcome to your beginning of manhood.
I like that.
You challenge yourself. Really You're cool. Earning it. You know, and I wish our society had more to do that. But we can't, you know, society will never have that again. So it's up to us as husbands, as fathers, as future leaders, right, to make this for our 100%. Young men, right, which was so cool about the church that did that, right? And that's where we're going to find this stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, we're going to find this, we're going to find this in churches, right? We're going to find this in fellowship, and you know, there used to be the Boy Scouts, but you know, now it's whatever. That's not the organization it used to be. But there are some like it, you know. But I think this is important. And Steffen, to your point about being a protector and a provider and adding leadership to that, you know, it starts when you're young.
I agree.
You know, and if we don't teach them, who is? Mm-hmm. It ain't going to be Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
No.
Those don't make men.
Yeah, if anything, that's the opposite.
Right?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, we need more of that in our society, honestly, because it starts young. It starts at that age. Accountability, responsibility, family, all these things, like when it becomes important to you. And that's awesome to hear, honestly.
Yeah, and you know, Steffen and I are on the mats quite a bit, you know, and I believe that we find a lot of this in jiu-jitsu. Like, you know, where I found my best friend Dave was on the mats. You know, that fellow man that was just struggling to be the best father and husband he could, you know, for his family, right? And even on the mats, you know, like we bond with jiu-jitsu, but then we have deeper conversations, like how many friendships have been built and other things and networks and things from the mats. But what do we do first? We challenge ourselves.
We train.
Right? We train. Right? And I know what you look like after training. I'm often like an Apollo sweat, like, you know, like I got to get these pajamas off. They're soaking wet, you know, but it's awesome, you know, and I talk about training jiu-jitsu a lot, you know, and my son doing wrestling now, because I told him, like, son, I'm not big into forcing him to do things, but I did tell him, as long as you live under this house, you're going to play football. You're going to play football, so you know what it's like to be part of a team, and you're going to do wrestling. You're going to do wrestling because it's going to make you mentally and physically tough.
Oh, yeah.
And once you leave, you know, once you're 18 and you move out, you don't ever have to do it again if you don't want. But the lessons you're going to learn from football and from wrestling, you will take with you the rest of your life. And I'm not going to rob you of that. I could let him whine. He hated football this year. I could let him whine, and I could let him, not do it next year or whatever. But what do I really rob him of? All of those lessons. All of those lessons that he's going to learn throughout the years while he's learning to become a young man. And I'm not going to do that.
Right. And you're setting him up to be a SEAL. If he goes into the wrestling.
When he was little, he'll have a better chance than just a football player will, right? But, when he was little, he was like, I want to be a Navy SEAL firefighter like you, Dad. And I'm like, we'll see. We'll see. I'm not pushing it on him. If he wants to be a SEAL, great.
Yeah.
If he wants to be, cybersecurity in the Air Force, great. Yeah. I don't care. It's his life. Sure. He's got to live his own life. If he doesn't want to join the military at all, right now we've been talking about him becoming an electrician, right? Learning a trade, because these things will always be around. Yeah. He's got to live his life. SEAL was my dream.
Right.
Firefighter was just something that seemed cool,
Yeah.
Now I get to live my dream by teaching firearms and self-defense, which is pretty fun.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be his dream. He can, whatever he wants to do, I don't care. I'm just going to help him. I want him to be successful.
Yeah, for sure.
I want him to be happy, and, but that's more what I care about, him becoming, a productive member of society.
Right.
I like that.
Right. And that's a role as a father. It's the guide. We don't come into this world knowing how we're supposed to handle the world, how we're supposed to approach it and stuff, but it's the father's role. So that's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, I hope I don't get it wrong.
You're doing a great job.
I read, when I was done with my last deployment and I knew I was going to be taking instructor duty, I started devouring books on how to be a good husband and a good father. Because I knew how to be a good warrior, but I wasn't quite sure how to be a good husband, father, and man. Mm-hmm. Not that my dad was a bad one, but he wasn't always the best example either. And my wife and my children deserved it. They deserved me to study that.
For sure.
To be the best I could be. And I'm still figuring it out, right? Turns out God only made one perfect man.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
His name was Jesus. And I try to walk in his footsteps, but I stumble along the way.
Sure.
I do the best I can.
Yeah.
And hopefully, when my children are parents, they'll look back and see that. Dad did the best he could. I think that's all they can ask.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think your kids definitely have a great shot at being successful with what we see they're being taught.
They've got a great mom.
Love that.
Their mother is outstanding.
Yeah. Would y'all have anything else? All right. Well, thank y'all for joining us today with the Patriot Point Show. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We hope to bring you as much value as possible in the coming future. And until next time.